So yeah, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity today. My name is Carson Walker. I'm a sales engineer with Hitachi Vantara. Seeing that we're here for a kind of a lunch and learn, today what I'm going to do is just give you an overview of the way we see most of our customers and most organizations today managing their data, the data flow from all the way from databases to the reporting side of it, and give you kind of an overview of how we were able to help them as well. So in the organizations today, what we have heard from our analysts and from just the market is that data is growing very fast, doubling at least every 2 years. One of the things that I like to ask is, in an organization, we have our typical data, CRM data, web data, and your typical kind of log file type data or just like flat files, ERP type data. So how much of that data do you think takes up your organization in the overall data space? When this data here, I would call that more the big data. So that's like your unstructured, semi-structured type data. How much do you think that would be? It's typically about 35% of the smaller stuff. So really, you're looking at 65% of the big data space, unstructured data. And in a lot of ways, we find that calling it dark data or undiscovered data, where organizations typically have it, but they don't know necessarily what to do with it. And so that's what we're here to look at today. And so what I'll start off is with a little context. What we find, I don't know if I'm going off the screen or not, you typically start with a lot of the data, just your structured data, so relational databases, Excel files, flat files, RDB. So we just call this your structured data. Now, companies have been working with this kind of data for years, for forever. And typically what we see is that you're working through some sort of ETL process, or extract, transform, and load, taking data out of its original data sources, and then loading it into what we call, or what they call, a data warehouse. So getting it into some sort of enterprise data warehouse. Now, this can all be different. Typically, you're going to be in your Teradatas or your Oracles. And these can be quite expensive as they start to grow up. Now, from here, this type of extract, transform, and load kind of process into this, it's good for storing all of your data, but then being able to expose that to different parts of the organization. Different parts of the organization have different types of their needs, so you want to do another kind of ETL process and really start to build out mini data marts. So maybe a data mart for sales, data mart for marketing, for finance. They all have their own kind of data needs, so they essentially want to take out their data and then do their own kind of slicing and dicing on it. And it's at that point, from here, that we move all the way up to kind of the reports. And these are your standard reports, like your bar charts and pie charts. Maybe you want to have users do some slicing and dicing of the data, getting some just static interactive reports, or maybe just some static kind of pixel perfect type reports, or even building out full-on dashboards, kind of combining it all together, having your charts, whatever you want, and having them kind of interactive. So that's what we typically see in the market here. Any questions so far? Nope? Okay. So this kind of structure here is what most people are doing today. At this end here, you kind of see a lot of different types of visualization tools, and there are hundreds in the market. Moving along here, as I said, the enterprise data warehouses can be quite expensive, in the millions of dollars in many cases with Oracles, the Teradatas, and even in these ETL process tools as well, like the Informaticas of the world, helping move and ingest the data across this data flow. It can get quite expensive, but most people know how to do this step here. What we hear a lot from our customers and what we're seeing in the market as well is, of course, the unstructured stuff. So you're talking about like the Facebooks, the Twitter, the web logs. This is the unstructured. So this big data, as we call it, is really where all the money is in a lot of people's minds. And people are starting to figure it out, if you haven't already. in the sense of we want to get this data out of the sensors, the areas that are generating all of the data itself, and get it into, well, somewhere to put it, right? So you may have heard this, you may have not, but there's a couple areas where you can put it out into. Now, the big name is Hadoop, way of putting unstructured data at a kind of a low cost. And of course, then into more of a NoSQL type database like a MongoDB. Hadoop is more like around like a Cloudera. You might have heard of them. Being able to actually take this data, and we're not really doing an ETL on this part. It's more just an E and an L, so extract and load. You just want to be able to load it into that database or that into like a Hadoop type of database, but you're not necessarily needing to do the transformation on it. We can if there's time, but typically this is at high speed, high transaction, high volumes, high velocity, so you don't typically transform it. Now, this piece here as well, a lot of people might be just doing things like hand coding it, getting it through things like Scoop or Flume or Pig, Java, really struggling to get that data into one of these types of databases. Or they might have hired a bunch of coders to come in and actually write the code out. But if they leave the organization, they might have their code and you have to kind of review it. So it can be a challenge when you're doing things like hand coding. But a lot of organizations have gotten to this point. The question is, what do we do with this and how do we kind of get value from this data? So this is where Pentaho and Hitachi Vantara starts to come in to help out with this. We know that we want to get it to this point of maybe getting some useful information out of the data itself. And so what we find is that through Pentaho, or our data integration, we have the capability of helping you out and maybe putting this data into more analytical databases. So giving other tools to give high performance kind of querying, things like HP Vertica or Greenplum, giving you some more capabilities to actually do some processing on this data. And we do that through another kind of ETL process through one of our products, which I'll get to in a moment. And then once having it in these analytical high performance databases, giving that capability then to be able to start doing some more reporting onto those databases as well. Now, does this look like a kind of similar scenario to what you're doing today? Yeah? Okay. So what we do at Pentaho and at Hitachi Vantara is we help you by really kind of mapping out some main what we call use cases. Here, I'm just going to get rid of this here. And give you some ideas or what we call blueprints on how to monetize or how to work with your data and really give you some advantages. So for example, I work with a customer, call that data warehouse optimization. So I work with a customer that is processing over 27 hours worth of data into their data warehouse. Now, it started off as just structured data coming into the data warehouse, but of course other types of data started trickling in, like log data, that was mostly a lot of it. And this started to really bloat out their data warehouse, getting really expensive to store and manage. So by using Pentaho, we were able to help offload some of this data. Well, we call it PDI, or Pentaho Data Integration. I'm just going to write that up for short, so I don't have to write all the time. We helped offload that data up into a NoSQL database or into Hadoop, and we were able to decrease that processing power from 27 hours down to only 6, significantly decreasing the cost of the data coming in because they were always behind. So decreasing the cost of storage and helping them actually then process and manage the data a little bit more efficiently. So we call that data warehouse optimization. Now, that's one particular use case. What we also found was that their analysts, they were having a lot of questions with the data. They always wanted to look at the data in different ways. They're asking for different types of data. They were asking for it in what we call like a different view, different angle. And so they were always coming back to IT, coming back to our analysts, our database analysts, asking for a new data source, new data slice. And that was a challenge. So would you see convenience in giving maybe those users to have maybe a web form or some sort of input where they can just come and they can pick a couple drop downs, maybe their region, maybe they're looking for a specific date range, specific product name, push a button, and then generate a database or data model on the fly, which then they can take and either visualize and analyze or slice and dice that data a little bit further, get the information, the value out of that data, and then throw it away afterwards if they want, or keep it, whatever they decide. Versus having to go back and always asking the analyst or the database analyst or the architect for a new access to the data. So we call that streamlined data refinery. And that really gives you that ability to kind of give your flexibility to your users to gain access to that data however they want. Now, one thing what we see is these data sets kind of are separated between structured and there's unstructured. But when you see value in being able to combine your data sources together, doesn't matter what types of data, any types of data sources, disparate sources, and really get a full 360-degree view. So like, for example, I work with a shipping company, and their ships actually have sensors all over the ships, tracking things like speed and every part of the machine engine temperatures. And for example, what the company was interested in was taking the data that was on their ships, and every ship had their own essentially database, but then also marrying that in with weather data and their GPS sensor logs to be able to really get a full view of exactly where that ship was at any given time, to be able to get the information on things like the fuel economy of each ship and ways to be able to actually adjust that by even simple things as cleaning the propeller or cleaning the hull from the barnacles. Being able to bring that together and getting a full, we call it ship 360, that at any point you could look at the boats and you could pick on a boat and see where it was and get that information by combining kind of the larger sensor GPS data with the onboard ship information to get that full holistic 360 view. So we call that ship 360. And essentially the last piece is at any point we always want to try and make more revenues is your data is valuable to you, your data is important, and finding new ways to actually monetize this data. So be able to take these two sets of data together and potentially finding new ways to actually monetize that, make new reports, packaging it together and actually reselling it. We work with a travel company that they take their information from all of their high-end clients and they want to make sure that the books that they're printing are well used. They're expensive books. They're thicker. You may have seen them. You see all the different awesome pictures of the places to go. But they're like $40 to $50 per book. They're not just going to take it to someone's going to throw it in the trash. So maybe you'll be able to take that data but combine it with information that if you have your point of sale system or if you're working with a credit card transaction company, and being able to marry that data together with some of the last trips that they've taken. You might not know exactly who they are, but their general demographic. And then be able to target those exact types of individuals to be able to send those books out and get a much better return on the actual investments that you're making with that types of data. So we call that monetize your data. So essentially, those are kind of some of the blueprints that I like to call them that allow you to look for just new areas and new insights into the data. And I'm just going to go monetize data. That you can take your data to find new insights and new information from that data. Thank you. Any questions?